As 17-year-old Natalie Sarkisian lay dying in the hospital, friends and nurses marched on the insurance company that had denied her a liver transplant. The company, Cigna, called the transplant experimental, not covered.
Insurers will call anything experimental if it's got a six-figure price tag.
But yesterday, under pressure, Cigna suddenly changed its mind. Nataline's mother delivered the news.
Cigna just approved us.
But it was too late. Last night, Nataline died.
They took my daughter away from me.
Today, the family's attorney said he'll press for Cigna to be charged with manslaughter, even murder.
Cigna Health Corporation literally, maliciously killed her.
Nataline's doctors told the insurance company 10 days ago her liver was failing. She needed a transplant to survive. But twice she was taken off the waiting list when Cigna refused to pay. In her battle against leukemia, Nataline recently had a bone marrow transplant. Her brother was the donor.
I gave her a chance. They said she has a chance, and I did my part. Someone else didn't do their part. Someone took that chance away from them.
This week, the California Nurses Association asked nurses nationwide to phone Cigna in protest. The nurses say insurance companies too often focus on money, not medicine. This is a common story.
Oh, this is a common story. This is not isolated. This is not isolated. And it's just a symptom of our health care.
Insurance regulators get 1.3 million calls a year, says the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. Most complaints are about claim denials, delays, and low settlement offers. In a brief written statement, Cigna says only that its deepest sympathies are with Nataline's family. John Blackstone, CBS News.
Now something that is generating great debate in medical circles, an experimental treatment for AIDS, an unproven treatment called hyperthermia. Today, for the second time this year, a patient here in Atlanta underwent that treatment. It happened at Atlanta Hospital, the same hospital that is in the process of having its license to operate taken away. Channel 5's Russ Jameson has details on today's experimental surgery.
He is now resting in the intensive care unit and seems to be stable.
He is 37 years old, from Chicago, diagnosed with AIDS 4 years ago. He is known only as Tony. And this morning he underwent a controversial new treatment called hyperthermia. The technique circulates blood out of the body and heats it to 108 degrees before returning it. Carl Crawford was the first patient 4 months ago. Nearly dead from an AIDS-related cancer, he took a shot in the dark.
I had nothing to lose.
Now doctors say he is cancer-free and shows no signs of the AIDS virus. Just after today's operation, surgeons reported their latest patient is doing well.
I'm happy to report to you that, as far as we can tell, all of the efforts in the operating room were successful. We did not have any complications.
While admitting that these early results may raise hopes, even false hopes, both doctors, Alonzo and Logan, say that the use of this procedure should be accelerated, not only for better data, but also for ethical reasons. Cancer specialist Dr. Kenneth Alonzo says too little is known about this new treatment and its results, so they will repeat these procedures soon.
I think ethically, the demands made upon us as well as on other physicians is to come down here, see what we're doing, take the protocol, and look at others who are HIV positive.
Tony's
And to top our news here at 6 o'clock, an age-old dream becoming a reality. A local inventor has discovered a way, hear this, to use water to run your car.
It's a major breakthrough that will no doubt make motorists happy. And as Ralph Robinson explains, the Pentagon is also showing lots of interest in this project.
Water has always been considered a precious commodity, but Stan Meyer's invention may make it even more valuable. He has developed what's called a water fuel cell. It has taken the place of his old gas tank. The water fuel cell breaks down water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen. The hydrogen is used to run his dune buggy.
I don't care if you use rainwater, well water, city water, ocean water. If you don't have any fresh water, go ahead and use snow. If you don't have any snow available to you, then use salt water because there's no adverse effect to the fuel cell.
Meyer started working on this project 4 years ago. He's not a scientist. He isn't even a chemist. In fact, he never graduated from college. Myers was determined, he says, to design something to protect this country from oil embargoes.
And we have calculated that if we take the dune buggy from Los Angeles to New York, we would roughly use 22 gallons of water.
The Pentagon flew a lieutenant colonel in last week to look at Meyer's invention. There's talk of possibly using it in the Star Wars defense program and to run Army tanks. Myers is currently perfecting a water fuel cell for cars. It will cost about $1,500. He says it won't need any maintenance, and you won't have to replace it. It'll be at least 2 years before the fuel system goes into mass production. The day it happens will be one the fuel industry hates, but it'll put a smile on the face of those who've had to say at one time or another, fill her up. I'm Ralph.
A car that runs on water instead of gasoline. Can it be true? Well, inventor Stanley Meyer made an announcement today in Colorado Springs. He says he's come up with a device that will hook up to any engine and allow it to run on good old H2O. News 13's Kurt Goff tonight on the possible impact of the water fuel cell.
Stanley Meyer says the answer to dependence on foreign oil lies all around us. In seawater, tap water, and rainwater. Any kind of H2O, he says, can power just about every type of engine. How? With the water fuel cell. It fits in the palm of his hand, but it could revolutionize the world.
You're talking about a pollution-free, totally new source of energy, the voltage dissociation of water.
The fuel cell converts water into a gas, hydrogen oxygen, which is released in the form of thermo-explosive energy.
So the water fuel injector simply replaces the spark plug. We hook it to a hydrogen computer system which regulates and meters the flow going into the injector. It processes the water in such a way to release its thermal explosive energy.
The man who invented an engine that can run on water says he's been offered $1 billion in cash by oil-producing countries to sell his patent. So far, he hasn't sold. The man who invented an engine that can run on water says he's been offered $1 billion in cash by oil-producing countries to sell his patent. So far, he hasn't sold. Environmental specialist Jan Porter talked to the inventor, who thinks that the U.S. auto industry could produce cars that run on water now if they wanted to.
Our industrial base of the world is based on the utilization.
Stan Meyer has a car that runs on water, and that's drawing crowds at this year's Extraordinary Science Conference in Colorado Springs. Myers has developed what is called the water fuel cell injector. The injector breaks down the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen, and the hydrogen is what powers the car.
Basically, all we do is replace the spark plug and replace it with the water fuel cell injectors you see right here. We simply feed ordinary non-processed water or processed water in here, and as the water goes into the injector, it hits a very high pulse voltage frequency, which instantly converts it into thermal explosive energy. And as a result, we can run this car down the road on water.
Meyer's invention was introduced in Britain earlier this month, and now the Brits have followed him here.
We recently took a scientific delegation to witness Stan's work, to really evaluate it, and came back saying, this is one of the most important inventions of the century.
For 15 years, Meyer has been fighting to get his inventions taken seriously.
Most inventors have to be a loner. You have to be somewhat thick-skinned and don't rely on other people to support you, because they will not. More times than not, an invention is really stolen from the inventors. Even in my prior development of high technology, I've had patents taken from me. I learned from the School of Hard Knocks to be very cautious.
Meyer has always stood out against the crowd. He has no formal qualifications as a scientist because he didn't wait to graduate from high school, leaving early to go straight into research at the high-powered Battelle Institute in his native Ohio. Now he works full-time as a private inventor. He's built a device with potentially revolutionary implications. There is nothing startling about a machine that can extract the hydrogen from water. What is highly unusual is that it should do so with ordinary tap water. The conventional method is called electrolysis. Meyer has turned that process on its head. Unlike electrolysis, his device doesn't use up large amounts of electric current, nor does it produce an enormous amount of waste heat. For 20 years, he has been refining a method to fracture water, which produces vast amounts of hydrogen on demand. This is not his latest apparatus. He was unwilling to let us point a camera at that. This is the simple device he used to convince a reluctant patent office that his revolutionary concept actually works. Alloy rods, acting as electrodes, are housed in a Perspex container that's filled with water. Normal mains voltage is fed in through a transformer, but critically, there is virtually no current consumed, less than ½ an amp. The result is dramatic. Hydrogen pours off with the flick of a switch. Meyer claims the key is his electronics, which pulses electricity rapidly across the rods at up to 20,000 cycles per second. In a way that's not readily apparent, this process transforms the equation. Whereas in conventional electrolysis, 3 times as much energy is consumed as is produced in the form of hydrogen fuel, in Meyer's apparatus, the reverse is true. It appears to produce several hundred% more energy than it consumes.
Stan has something that's characteristic of the people that sound like they've done something to tap zero-point energy. Has high frequency, high voltage, and there's a combination of the two at which something occurs. With Chernetsky in Russia, it was what he called a self-sustaining discharge. The tube would run by itself. When Stan gets this effect, the amount of hydrogen and oxygen that are emitted off these 2 electrodes is a step function. It almost boils the water. If I did this with standard electrochemicals, I need current, and the water should rise a degree every couple of seconds. With Stan's, it'll run for a ½ hour, and the water temperature hasn't changed. Something's different.
Meyer demonstrates this repeatedly without any difficulty, and yet on the face of it, it represents an extraordinary revolution. His measurements over the years suggest 1,700% greater efficiency than conventional electrolysis. And if he's to be believed, he's getting much better results from his latest, still secret invention.
Well, I first got involved with Stan Meyer when I went over there with a couple of colleagues to look at his water-splitting device. And so we arrived at Stanley Mayer. He had a demonstration cell. We filled it with tap water. In fact, I did that myself. And he switched it on, and almost instantly the 3 jaws dropped because of the rate at which the gas poured off. It was quite spectacular.
Whatever energy source Stan Meyer had tapped, it was not explicable by the electric power that was going into it. So something was powering it outside of conventional wisdom.
There is no question that the gas coming off in such abundance is hydrogen. Meyer ignites it to produce a high-temperature flame able to cut through metal.
Stanley Mayer has faced a lot of difficulties. He's 3 times tried to launch the device and produce press conferences, had the technical press round, but he's been almost universally slated. In the early days, very much so, they just ridiculed the whole idea. He's getting a little more notice now because some scientists are getting interested. But by and large, science is very intolerant, particularly modern science.
As with Tesla, Griggs and others, Meyer's claims are so far outside the received scientific wisdom that they've been ignored by the majority of the scientific establishment. But then, Meyer has ignored them too. He has poured his energies over the last 10 years into establishing recognition for his claims by getting international patents.
In the processing, there was a great deal of difficulty in trying to process the legal paperwork in such a way as to allow the patent office to fully understand what was actually occurring. In one instant, we brought the water fuel cell to Washington, D.C., and of course I had tweaked it in such a way to produce an enormous amount of hydrogen oxygen gas, and the patent examiner said, no, it will not work based on the electrolysis process. And when we turned it on and produced an enormous amount of hydrogen gas, the examiner finally realized that we were doing exactly that, and went out in the hallway and started screaming and hollering to everybody on the floor, put out all your cigarettes, hydrogen's in the building. So we started laughing and said, well, we certainly convinced everybody in the patent office that we can do what we said we can do.
Even so, the US Patent Office dragged their feet for 3 years before granting patents on the hydrogen-producing device. Since then, against massive resistance, he's managed to get patents established throughout Europe and Japan. But the hydrogen machine was only the first step towards Meyer's ultimate dream. If he gets it right, this application of his technology would change the 21st century in the same way that the Wright brothers and Carl Benz transformed the 20th. He is currently modifying a beach buggy to run on nothing but water. It doesn't have a petrol tank or even a hydrogen container. It has just a tank of water. He's invented a device called a water splitter to replace the spark plug. As the water is injected into the engine, Meyer claims it's fractured into hydrogen and oxygen, then burned as fuel. Meyer is working on a kit to modify any engine. He hopes to demonstrate it on this car within 12 months.
And of course, the blessing to the use of the water as a fuel source, that on combustion, the byproduct is water mist. So we're even solving the environmental pollution problem at the same time that we're using water to maintain the industrial basis of the world.
But though the scientific establishment may have ignored the likes of Meyer, the powerful military-industrial complex certainly hasn't. Over the past 10 years, Meyer says he's been quietly approached by many influential organizations who would never admit publicly to their involvement with him.
It is involved in deep space exploration, and it's also being developed quite highly in the military. Basically what occurred with water fuel cell was in the fact that once they understood was actually occurring, then under the U.S. national security mandate, I have no decision or power of whether or not the military or NASA or the federal government will utilize the technology. They can utilize it in any way they so desire.
NASA is using every method it can to regain some of its now fading glory. In the face of strong congressional resistance, the days of limitless budgets for space exploration have long since gone. As the champion of a new, environmentally friendly energy source, NASA would gain immense support.
Do you have your identification?
As a former top scientist of the NASA Spaceplane project, Professor Paul Ziss has an inside track on the workings of the agency.
NASA has large centers. The center that's in charge of propulsion is NASA Lewis in Cleveland, Ohio. Can you imagine, instead of having a million-pound rocket has 900,000 pounds of fuel on board and oxidizer? Can you imagine what it would be like if you could put a device on there that would split water and run it into your engine? No explosive compounds.
Public confirmation of a contract from NASA would provide a resounding boost for Mars technology. Paul Ziss says it's only in a closed meeting they confirm such an agreement.
They're looking for new energy sources. I understand from the people that I've talked with that they have worked with Stan and tried to understand what he's done and given him a contract. I also understand with the bureaucracy in Washington and the congressional oversight as to why they would never admit it.
When new technology comes in existence, there's a great resistance to it because it can affect a lot of economic factors. In this particular case in the United States, we pay out roughly about $200 billion a year for foreign oil. It's quite obvious that the Arabs would pay $200 billion to try to keep this type of technology out of the economy. And many times over the last decade, I have been offered enormous amounts of money to simply sell out or to sit on it. The Arabs offered me well over $1 billion cold cash simply to sit on and do absolutely nothing with it. The Arabs offered me well over $1 billion cold cash simply to sit on and do absolutely nothing with it. My life has been threatened many times. Of course, I happen to believe in the power of angels. And if I don't believe in the power of angels, I don't believe I'll be around here too long.